I'm here today to talk about leadership and the development of leadership. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, well, Steve, why should you be up here talking about that type of stuff? Well, really, I spent 35 years in the landscape snow and ice management industry, and I built a company that in the end was about $104 million before I fully exited. So over those years, it was a lot of building, and I'm sure Josh is going to talk about it too. When you get these hyper-sized companies, the difficulty in building them and everything. So we're going to talk about that today, and as Jordan said, come up with some great questions, because I really want you guys to push me. And like I said, I'm open to talking about anything. So I'm going to give you a quick timeline on what happened so you guys have some bases. I'm only going to talk for about an hour, and so that'll leave us about an hour for Q&A. Jordan said, hey, you got to be up there for 2 hours. I'm like, holy shit, that's a long time. But so really, I started, my company was called ULS, and it started in 1989, and it was a school project in university. And what we had to do is we had to come up with an MBA level kind of business plan, and me and my buddy Paul, the same guy that was punking me on coming to Mankato, we wrote this 110-page business plan, and it was great. I was at U of C. I was there on a hockey scholarship, so I was playing hockey, and I was finally excited because in my family, people kind of looked down on you if you went to university. And my mom and dad went to university, but everybody else was blue collar, construction workers. My grandma and grandpa had a chain of craft stores, if you believe that, and they all said, Steve, don't go to university. You're just going to get a bunch of debt. Like, go and start a business. So, I was kind of like trying to fast track my way through university, and I went because it was free for me because I got paid to play hockey there. So we wrote this MBA level, paper about white knighting the landscape and snow industry. So we started this project. It ended up to be 110 pages. We did the presentation. And our mark was a B-, if you believe that. And I was a little bit pissed off, and I went to the prof, I said, what's going on? He said, well, it wasn't that creative. And I said, well, I thought the purpose of a business plan was to make money, not to just, come up with something creative. So, anyway, that summer we launched ULS in 1989, and all of a sudden we were out there doing it. And, I had lots of offers to go and do other things and have a job, but I wanted to be outside, I wanted to feel the wind in my hair. I had this claustrophobic feeling of being jammed inside of a cubicle, and I just didn't want to do it. So we started the company, and it started to grow really fast. And we had about 4 partners to begin with at university, but in 1993, I bought my brother out. My brother, I got offered 3 pro hockey contracts to play in Europe and to play in the American Hockey League. And my brother had the same thing, and he actually decided to go play in Sollingham, Germany. So he played for the Henkel knife factory over there, so they had knives all over their jerseys, and my brother played hockey there. So actually, my brother was kind of lazy. He'd only come back and work for 3 months. And so I said, Jim, I got to buy you out. Jimmy's like, you're going to screw me over, Steve. I know it. And I said, no, Jimmy, we'll make this fair. So I bought my brother out for 12,500 Canadian dollars, which is about, whatever, $13 American. And I bought my brother out, and to this day, it's the best investment in stock buy I ever did. I think when I got bought out, I can't even remember how many X it was. I think it's like 1,000X investment. So I got rid of my brother, so he's still a little bitter at me for that move. And then I moved on, and in 2013, I had one partner left. The fellow, his name was Ross, and I always say, I got one brother that my mom and dad gave me, and I got one brother that business gave me. And I know you guys have a lot of close friends in business. But Ross was like, me and Ross were inseparable, but right around 2013, things weren't going that great. I always tell people if you're in a partnership, you need to sit down every year and talk about it, because it's hard to have companies when you have multiple partners, everybody has a different idea, and you have to stay in unison. Like in Alberta, where I'm from, it's a 10% chance you're going to get divorced. And in business, I guarantee you, if you have partners, it's way bigger chance that you're going to have issues and you're going to get into disagreements. So you got to be hashing this out all the time. So in 2013, me and Ross kind of got a little bit, I'd like to use the word pissed off. I'm trying to keep this somewhat PG today because Martin from Simon's here, and he's like, oh, Steve, you can't swear so much, but trust me, a few F-bombs are coming. especially for you, Martin. I put it right into the program just to piss you off. Anyway, so in 2013, me and Ross started like battling a little bit, and boom, one thing led to another, and we had a unanimous shareholders agreement, luckily. Now, if you guys don't have that in your company, you need to make sure if you have partners that you have a USA. So with unanimous shareholders agreement, it outlines everything so that if you ever get into a disagreement, divorce, dismemberment, disability, you can figure out a plan to move forward. Well, luckily me and Ross had that, and also inside the USA is what's called the shotgun clause. So that's where one partner makes an offer and the other guy can take the check or he can leave. So I gave Ross an offer. I said, here's how much I'm willing to pay for the business. Ross said, see you later. Ross took a $2.5 million check at the time and walked away. And I was left with ULS. So that was 2013. Fast forward to 2015, and we're going to go through this when I talk in leadership, but I started to get a little bit antsy and I wanted to do other things. Like entrepreneurial people, like Jordan here, like he's jumping around like a jackrabbit on a hot tin roof, trying to do all kinds of different things, inventing things and starting other businesses. And I'm sure he's got all kinds of other shit going on the side that he doesn't talk. Probably he's got a drug cartel in Mankato or something. He hasn't told me about yet until later tonight when I get him drunk. But in 2015, I started a company up called Spectrum Equipment. Now, Spectrum Equipment was with the #1 cat guy in Calgary when we started this company, and it grew really quickly. We were actually, at one time, the second largest metal plus dealer in North America, next to yours truly down here and the boys from Storm. So we were #2, but as Canadians, we always understand that, a little bit subservient to the United States. I'm not a foolish Canadian. If the tanks come lining up at the border, as long as they don't hurt my family or take my house, I'm like, I'm patching over here. Like, I don't give a shit. Especially if I could get the exchange rate, Jordan. Like, that's what I want. So anyway, these Canadian dollars, they're not worth a lot anymore. So in 2015, I started Spectrum up. In 2016, a weird thing happened. Out of the blue, I got nominated as one of the top 40 entrepreneurs for Canada by KPMG for medium businesses. Now, take it with a grain of salt, guys. You can win an award for anything nowadays, right? You just keep filling up. Like Ernst & Young has a million things. There's so many awards now. It's like kids now, right? They play soccer and everybody gets a medal and shit. It's getting like that in business. But I was one of the top 40 entrepreneurs in Canada, and I went to the Ivy School of Business, and I got a fellowship there. And it was on quantum business shifting, entrepreneurism. So it was really cool. So it was a deep think tank. When I left Ivy, I had a fellowship. And then what happened was in 2019, I went to Palm Springs, California. I know this is going to sound crazy. I was down there playing pickleball with my wife. And, don't laugh at me. I was talking to a lady last night about pickleball. And pickleball's super fun. It's like if you haven't done it, you got to try it. It's like masturbation, right? Pickleball and masturbation are exactly the same thing. They're super fun until you get caught. But anyway, I was down there playing pickleball, honing my skills, trying to grow as a pickleball player. And I got a call from this guy, and he said, "Hi, Steve, I want to buy your business." And we're going to get a little bit talking about private equity later and what's going on. But this guy said, "Steve, I want to buy your business." Jordan, you got that call, didn't you? Kind of a weird feeling, and you kind of sit there, and I was sitting in Palm Springs, I had some big sunglasses on, I was smoking a cigar, I'm like, well, it's not for sale. And he said, well, we need to talk, and I said, well, I'm down in Palm Springs. He said, when are you back? I said, 3 more days. Anyway, I came back to Calgary, eventually we sold the business, and I'll get more into the story later. And then, so I sold ULS in 2019, we're about 31 million, and then for the next 4 years, I sat as the CEO to 2024, we grew it to 104 million, and then I'd had enough. We'll talk about that later. And that's kind of the time frame. So you guys might be sitting out there and going, well, Steve, why should you be talking about leadership? Well, when I finally wrapped everything up, I had 3 companies, so ULS was doing about 104 million, a development company that I started in 2015, and Spectrum were doing about another 25 million. So it was about $130 million of sales the last year. And over that time period, I had roughly around 950 staff on our payroll, and then another probably 1,000 subcontractors that signed agreements to work exclusively for us under a subcontractor agreement that I think was very fair. We treated our subs like they were part of the company. They came to our Christmas parties. I mean, you have a Christmas party for 1,800 people, like it's like 100 grand if you're lucky. And we had these big events and it was crazy, but we had a lot of fun. So really, you know, I've had a lot of experience in leadership, and I know, like today I didn't wear my Depends because I think I can stand up here for 2 hours without pissing myself, but I'm like just about 60. So I'm getting pretty old. I've had a lot of experience. So hopefully today I can give you guys some background on leadership and talk to you. Not really, I'm not up here, like I don't really use PowerPoints. These are supposed to change every 3 minutes. They're just dumb stuff flashing up there. I don't even look back. I talk from my heart. I talk to people about real things. I would say it's more of an experience when I talk. It's about taking you along the ride and what happened. And from that, you guys might hear things that will spur you to go, you know what I'm doing? I'm going through that now, or geez, I was thinking that could happen in another couple years. So I'm going to kind of take you on this journey of kind of what happened and how I develop it as a leader. Now, one of the things you got to remember is there's many stages of leadership, and you can read different books, and I kind of felt like I had 6 stages of leadership, but there's really 3 main stages of leadership. The first one is what they call the emerging leader, and then the second one is the evolving leader, and then the third one is what's called a mature leader. Now, as I go through this talk today, you guys are going to resonate with that. Maybe you're in that evolving leadership phase, or maybe you're an emerging leader and you're starting to build some of the strong skills that you need to be a solid leader. Or maybe, you know, you're at a mature leadership. I think that, you know, somebody like Joshua, when I talk about a mature leader, is going to kind of resonate with some of the stuff that I went through. And all of you are going to resonate with different things. So, before I get going, well, I'm already going, but I want to tell you guys another story. I'm a little bit of a storyteller, right? So I want to tell you a story about 3 kings, and they all had different leadership styles. So these kings were in a distant land. This was a long, long time ago, hundreds and hundreds of years, and they lived in this big area of land, and it was divided into 3 kingdoms. So one of each king ruled over a different kingdom. Now, the first king's name was King Softly. Now, if I was doing the X-rated version, I would call him King Pussy, but because I can't say those things today, I'm just going to go with King Softly so I don't keep saying the P word over and over up here. But King Softly was, he was just a weird king. Like, he liked to wear tight pants and, you know, weird shoes with sparkly danglies on him. He'd prance around playing his fiddle like this, or his flute, and he was just such a great leader. He gave everybody everything. There was parties every night. There was drinking and fornication, playing cards, staying up late. There was no chores for any. They just did whatever they wanted. Wow, we'll pick the corn tomorrow. And King Softly just went on and on. This is how he led, just trying to make everybody happy all the time. And King Softly, you know, part of his demeanor was that he didn't have a dog. He carried around this pet lamb, and he'd come down the streets and he'd sit there and he'd go, "Here, children, pet this lamb." And these little children would rush up and, "Oh, King Softly, this is so good." And they would pet this lamb. And this went on. And he was just adored. He was such a great king. He'd give everybody what they wanted. You know, hardly any taxes. It was like living in the U.S. So anyway, finally one day, King Softly was there, and in the distance he sees this other king on his horse with his army, and he's starting to come toward King Softly's kingdom, and he's like, "Oh, who's that?" And on the horse was King Dickerson. Now, he wasn't related to Todd Dickerson at all, but he was a dick. Todd's not a dick, but King Dickerson, this guy was a dick. And this guy was a mean son of a bitch. And he started riding in with his army, and on his side, he didn't carry a lamb, he had a sword, and this sword was 6 feet long, and it was forged from the hardest steel you could find on the planet. And it was forged in the fire of 3 dragons. And King Dickerson came into the kingdom of King Softly, and he murdered, raped, and pillaged everyone. He didn't even spare a child. And the last man was King Softly, and he took a knee in front of King Dickerson, and King Dickerson cut his head off and then stabbed his lamb to death. and let it bled out. And then he left laughing away like, ha ha, I'm the king. What a horrible leader. I showed him I've taken over his kingdom. And he rode back to his kingdom. And King Dickerson shows back up and he starts telling everybody how great he is and how he kicked ass and how he's taken over a new kingdom. But everybody didn't really care because they're so scared of King Dickerson. They lived in fear. They were just scared all the time. They were just cowering all the time. And he would like walk down the streets and like pretend he was going to hit kids, and they would cower. And he'd always have his hand on his sword. And this just caused people to be in fear. But he thought he was a great leader, and he thought he was a great person. And then one day, King Dickerson went to sleep. And in his sleep, a whole bunch of his fearful, very fearful people ganged up and killed him in his sleep. They stabbed him in the heart, they took his sword, and they threw it into the fire, and they melted it down. So here's two kingdoms ruled by two different leaders, and now they're decimated. The third king hears of this, like, what the hell's going on? There's shenanigans in the kingdoms. And this king's name was King Balanceforth. Now, King Balanceforth, what a king this guy was. He'd walk along, he had a sword on this side, and he had this little hammock over here, kind of like one of those baby Bjorns, you know? He's carrying around a lamb on this side and a sword on this side. He would come up to people, and children would pet the lamb, and he had rules. He told people what they were, and if you ever pushed the line, if you stole, he would just take your hand and cut it off with his sword. But he ruled in a way that was balanced, hence his name, King Balanceforth. And so as King Balanceforth went through his reign, he said, look, there's these other kingdoms and they need help. So he opened up his doors and said, come to my kingdom. I'm going to lead you to the promised land. I'm going to make sure that you can provide for your family and your children. Make sure that there's fair wages in the kingdom, that I treat you well, that we're all part of a bigger purpose and a bigger group and a bigger team. And in the end, King Balanceforth lived forever and ruled over the biggest kingdom that was ever created in this time. Now, you guys need to think about the three kings, because when I work with people in my advisory group, I often say, what king is this person at the start? And usually when somebody asks you to be their advisor, or I come to an event like this, most of the people are good leaders, or they have the ability to become good leaders. Because people that are dicks don't usually come to these things because they think they know it all. And people that are maybe a little too soft and too easy say, well, I don't need to go to a leadership thing or go to the Stormfield days because, I don't really need to learn more. We're having a lot of fun. I'm okay with where my company is. But people like you guys, I would assume, want to one day be that type of leader that can make sure that there's rules established, that you lead in a manner that leads you forth, that builds strong kingdoms and builds you guys a legacy. So let's get into these stages of leadership. So stage one, the emerging leader. Really, this is where a leader awakens and finds identity. So when you're first working with a group of people or you get involved in something, you might not even know you're the leader. Because sometimes you anoint yourself the leader, but the best leaders are actually anointed by the people that they work for them. So you'll see an emerging leader, and some of you might be at that if you're in a smaller company, where they start to feel this kind of pull to lead people and to guide them, but they have to find this identity. They have to find out who they are. Now, when I first started my company, you know, for the longest of time, I felt very scared. And I want to admit that in front of everybody. People will say, well, Steve, you're so successful, but, you know, Chris was at my talk in Toronto, and I really talked about, well, it was a successful journey, but there's tons of mistakes. But I was scared shitless because I went to university. I was on my hockey scholarship, but I decided to have kids. Not really by choice, it was by chance. But once I had one, I said, I might as well pump them out. My buddies are like, you're playing on a hockey team, trying to win a national championship. We're flying around in a plane. You got kids at home. I'd started my landscaping company up, so I was working all the time. When I went to university, I had like long hockey hair, like a mullet, like all the boys do now. And I was the boy, and I wore a white t-shirt, and I wrote on the front, C's get degrees. And my prof was like, Steve, you're so smart. Like, why don't you try to get better marks? And I said, I don't got time for this shit. I said, like, I got kids at home. I'm changing diapers. I'm getting on a plane to play hockey. I got to try to finish my business degree. You know, I'm serious. I said, f off and leave me alone. I just want to get a C and get out of here. I had to go start my own business. So it was tough. But while I was going through this, I always said to myself, like, do I really want to do this? Like, do I want to be a leader? Because sometimes people think they got to be a leader, but they don't want to be a leader. You got to decide inside your soul, do you want to do this? Because being a leader is a huge responsibility. You got to look after your family, you're looking after your employees, you're looking after suppliers. And in the end, it comes down to how good you are. And as an emerging leader, you need to nail this down. Now, all these things happen when you're an emerging leader and you're trying to find this identity. But once you kind of click into it, you know, boom, there you go. You say, okay, I'm doing it. I'm all in. That's what happened to me. I'm a leader now. I got to lead these people. And you hear this all the time. Like, lead by example. Right? You guys heard that? Lead by example? You know, I read a post that Joshua was talking about being at the front lines and leading by example. And that's super important, and that's what happens when you're an emerging leader. And sometimes as you kind of develop as a leader, you forget that, so you have to go back once in a while, and that's why I respect what he's doing. But here I am, and I've said I'm going to be a leader. I'm all in. And the only thing I knew, because I hadn't built all the other skills of leadership, was to lead by example. So what did I do? I was the first one to the shop. I was the last one to leave. I was the best plower. I was the guy that could build a deck. You know, I used to be 235 pounds, and now I'm like 200. Like, I was a meathead. Like, you guys should have seen me. Like, seriously. Like, I had cuffs on. Like, I looked like Thor and long hair. I carried around a hammer. God, we're going to build this retaining wall. Running around like an ape on steroids. But that's how I led. And then, you know, I always kind of think of that time as wear a helmet, take a bullet. And I remember that movie. I don't know if you guys remember. Some of you guys are too young, but Platoon. And there's all those field captains and generals in the back tent. They're like, yeah, go get them. And then Tom Berenger is with the platoon. And then Tom Berenger's got a cigar in his mouth. He had that scarred face. And he had like a pack of smokes in his helmet. And the generals are like, you got to be careful and go this way. And then Tom Berenger goes, F you. I'm taking the hill. And off Tom went. He goes whipping up the hill. Bullets flying off his helmet. And he's giggling about it. He's getting off on it. And he's just shooting the I don't want to. He's shooting people. He's killing them. He's just like, it's that guy in the striped shirt. It's going to be okay. We're all going to make it through this together. Okay? It's going to stick. Trust me. So anyway, he's running up the hill. Bullets flying off, and he takes the hill, and all his guys are pumped. And he goes back down. The generals are, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Sometimes you got to get shit done. You got to lead by example." So that's what I kind of felt like. I felt like Tom Berenger in that movie. And then, as you start to be Tom Berenger, that's a cool guy to be, right? And I don't know if some of you guys feel this way right now, but as an emerging leader, they get pulled into this. Steve's got to do everything. Steve's the best. No one can do as good a job as Steve. No one is as intense as Steve. No one can get it done. I got to do it. I'm the best. And you start to listen to this person that's talking to you, and he is the biggest asshole you're ever going to meet. And he's usually right beside you, and ladies have them, and men have them, and it's called your ego. And your ego is a dick. And he lies, he rubs your back. Oh, you're so good, Steve. Juan, you're the best. Actually, Juan, you are the best. But there's a guy, he's massaging your shoulders, Juan. He's like, man, you're so awesome. Nobody can do it like you. And you start to believe this ego. You start to believe it. You buy into it because you're just an emerging leader. You don't have the skills yet to tell them to f off. Oh, sorry, Martin. So you got to battle through this ego. And once you get through that, you know, and let go, then you can finally go on to the next stage. So I was caught here, like this Tom Berenger character, thought I was the cat's ass. And I don't even like cats, so I'm going to take that out of the next speech. I'm allergic to cats. But anyway, I battled with my ego, and then I said, it's over. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do everything and be a good leader. I'm stagnant. I'm stuck here in phase one. I'm just an emerging leader, and I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. And at the time, I was an $8 million company. So I went to one of these things like this, an event. I think it might even have been a Simon show, Martin. Simon shall set you free. And they started to talk about SOPs, and I'm like, oh, shit. I don't know if I need SOPs. I know everything, and just tell everybody that. And then I listened to some guys talk more. I said, you know what? I'm going to do some SOPs when I get back, and I'm going to change. I'm going to change as a leader. I'm going to let go of the ego, and I'm going to make SOPs. So I went back to Calgary. I'll never forget it. And I got at my desk the first day, and I kind of quickly templated it out, like 5 minutes. I figured I need roughly 100 SOPs. So that first day, I'm going to write my first SOP. I'm just about to touch the keys, and the phone rings. And it's one of my clients who said, Steve, I want you to come down here and look at a project for me. I said, oh, sure, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Left my desk, SOP screen open. And I go down, I talk to this client. I'm like, I can get back and start doing these SOPs. I drive all the way back across town. My phone rings. It's this guy. He said, Steve, I heard about your company. I'd like to work for you. I'm kind of a seasoned sales guy. I'll meet you at 15 minutes at Starbucks. And over I went, met with this guy. Then in the afternoon, I'm driving back, and one of our trucks lights on fire. And I'm like, I got to do SOPs, but there's a truck on fire. I better get over there. And I come over there, and I didn't even do anything. I just watched the last tire melt off the truck and just said, oh, I guess we got to replace it. And then I said, it's 3 o'clock. I can go get that first SOP done. I'm driving across. And then the dreaded call comes into my phone. Hi, honey. When are you going to be home? Oh, honey. It's one of my kids' birthdays. I almost forgot. So I got to run home, 4 o'clock, dress up as a clown. I was good at being a clown. So I show up at the birthday party. And the next day I go there and there's no SOPs done. And then I realized I gotta have a bigger change here. So I did the most crazy thing. Well, it was for me at the time. You guys might go, oh, Steve, why did it take you so long? And I went to my top 10 staff and I said, look, guys, we need SOPs. And they're like, and I want you guys to each write 10. There's 10 of you, each write 10. And they're just looking at me like, what happened to you? Did you get hit in the head? Like, are you sick? I'm like, no, like, you guys know this better than me. And they're like, well, actually, we don't. And I go, yeah, you do. You just don't know it yet because I haven't told you guys enough. And it's time to change. I need help. And they're like, what? You never asked for help, Steve. And I said, well, I am now, guys. So can you please help me? And I couldn't believe it. I went back to my office and I was scared shitless. Like I'm thinking, wow, I finally let go of something. And the most amazing thing happened. I just talked to them and wandered them. And a month later, they came to me with a book with 100 SOPs in it. I think there was 98 of them. And a table of contents. I was like, shit, I never told her to put a table of contents in there. Like, this is awesome. So now I'm sitting there and I go, this is so fantastic, you guys. What a great thing you did. And I could just see how excited they were to help and be part of the company. Like, I always made them feel good. Like, you guys have only known me for whatever, 20 minutes. But you can see I'm a little pretty charismatic and pretty jacked up. And I typically make people feel good. So they were good. But they felt like they actually got to be part of the company. And then one of these ladies that worked for me, she said, Steve, I had a kind of an HR person help me hire people. She said, we want you to make one SOP that kind of sums up the company culture and everything so that we can put it in the book for the first page or the last page. And I said, well, you guys did 98. I think I can do one. So the next day I came into the room and they were pumped because they did this book. And now Steve's going to do the last SOP. And I said, you know what? I've decided it should be the first page, not the 99th page, the first page. And I only wrote one SOP. The whole time I built a $104 million landscape company. You know what it said? It said, if you don't care, get the f out. And my HR girl said, Steve, I don't know if we can put that in the book. It might cause problems. I said, well, when the lawyers call, give them my number directly and I'll deal with them. And I want it to be the first page. When people came to work at ULS, like university students, professional landscape designers from colleges, professional people that learned how to plow to work for other companies, and they opened up that book at the orientation and it said, if you don't care, get the f out. You know how many people signed up to work? Must have been 25% said this, whoever would have this written here, I'm working for them. And they didn't even look at the rest of them. They were already in. Because the emerging leader now had found an identity for the company, and I had woken up and understood, okay, this is how I'm going to lead. So off to stage 2. The evolving leader is all about building up capabilities and credibility. Like I was a little bit of a loose cannon. I'd kind of simmered down on the platoon thing. But now I needed to build some more credibility and I had to build some more capabilities. Like I was kind of using up all my regular tricks to get people to do things for me. So I started to kind of develop. And when you become an evolving leader, you switch from kind of being the, the doer to the orchestrator. So although I'd done a little bit of delegation, this is where delegation for me took off. And I always say, delegation builds the nation. If you want to build a great country or you want to build a great company, you have to get extremely good at delegating. And, a lot of people say, oh, you got to follow up. They go through all these analogies. But I just think delegation's like a loop. So a lot of people think they delegate. So it's like throwing a boomerang. They think they're just going to throw it out there and it just keeps going in a straight line. But delegation is like you throw the boomerang and it comes out. And if you're not ready or checking on it, it comes back and hits you right in the side of the head. So I started to get really good at delegating, closing the loop, delegating, closing the loop. And then I started to see like this change, right? I was getting really good at delegating. And we had a pretty good culture, but I thought, this culture can be better now. I got all these people helping. I'm an evolving leader. What's really the next big step? And here's the mystery thing that everybody talks about. People always tell me this. Steve, our company has great company culture. What a load of bullshit. Most companies don't. And you know what? I bet you a lot of people in this room do. Because you're here, you care about your companies, you're invested, you're bringing employees. But most people, what a crock of shit. We got good cut. You know what? I said that too. I was an evolving leader, said we got the best company culture. And we did have pretty good company culture. But you know what it was? It was kind of like 25% of the people were drinking the Kool-Aid and 75%, they didn't even know what the company culture, they didn't know our mission statement, they didn't know our vision statement, they didn't know what we were doing. So we had a good culture, but it was very surface oriented. So I read a book on culture. It was got by a guy named Chip Conley. I don't know if you guys have ever read about him. He's a big hotel guy in Southern California, Northern California. He's basically taken over the state. And Chip wrote this book called Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow. And I read this book, and for some reason, and you guys might read it and go, oh, Steve is weird. But for some reason, and people always tell you or ask, what book should I read? I don't give a shit what books you read. Keep reading them until something grabs you, right? Grabs you by the heart, or grabs you by the throat, or makes you change. And this book was just a catalyst for me. Like, I was so into this book. I'm like, this Chip guy, he's so smart. I love how he's kind of related it to kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, I had a business degree when I went to university, but my minor was in psychology because I was going to be a sports psychologist, and then I realized, we're not going to make enough money doing that, so I got to change. But I went into business, and then for some reason I would have a landscape company. Like, that's f***ed up thinking. But anyway, so I got this book and I read it, and I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want in our company. So what I did, remember I was like 235 pounds, big muscled up meathead, and I got 10 of the books, and I came into our company. We had 120 people at the time, and I had them in my arms, and I showed up I said, we're going to have book club. I was big, muscled up guy. We're going to have book club. And everyone's like, were you watching Oprah or something? Like, this is weird, like book club. And I'm like, yeah. I said, I'm going to take these 10 copies and I'm going to give them out to people, and they got 30 days to read them, and then we're going to have a big like book club on it, and then they're going to give it to the next person. So off I went, gave them 30 days to read it. Now I had the book club, so I knew they read it, and we did these kind of tests, and I went through it, and these people were pumped up. They were just jacked up. I came out of that room, we were laughing, we were having so much fun, everybody was so excited. But it was only 10 out of 120. But now those 10 people had to give it to another 10 people. And after 12 months, 120 people had read the book and went through book club. And let me tell you, it really, really changed kind of the company culture. And now we had a culture that was deep. So here I was, an emerging leader. I was learning about how to build culture, how to set visions, how to get all this stuff done. Now, one of the big changes when you get big company culture and you really figure out company culture is there's a shift. Now, I hear a lot of people say, well, I got to motivate and I got to be a motivator. Well, motivation is secondary to inspiration. And the sooner you figure that out as a leader, the more successful. If you want to be successful and have 1,000 people working for you, do you know how exhausting it is to motivate them? Motivation is yelling, running up a hill, taking a bullet off your helmet, screaming at people in a loving way, caring, sharing, hugs, and the occasional, what the f*** are you doing? But you're there and you got to do it all. You're leading by example. You're like, more push-ups. It's that drill sergeant mentality. Okay? And then when you become this evolving leader, you start to realize how powerful inspiration is. And when you can inspire people without saying anything, it's unbelievable what starts to happen. It's kind of like, I don't know if you guys ever see some of these like lighthearted movies or something, and there's some guy and he's in his retirement, he's riding down the beach on a bike, takes his hands off the handlebars, he's just like in the San Diego sun, because we don't have sun in Canada, and he's like, oh, this is great, and the whole world's just coming to him, and the guy just keeps making money, and he's like, got nice cars, shit just happens, because he's realized that you can't just take a piece of steel and pound it and pound it and pound it with a hammer over and over and get anything beautiful. You got to find inspiration. You got to melt it down. You got to be a craftsman. And this inspiration, when you guys tap into it, will change you as a leader. It becomes unbelievable. Now, when I started going through this, the culture got better as a leader, and then all of a sudden, wow, I'm starting to find inspiration through the culture. I'm getting people that said, Steve, I think we should do this. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, go do that. That's awesome. Here's 500 grand. Don't blow it. Like, it just felt good. And people just did stuff. And it was so exciting. And then, this is going along. And then I said, okay, as an emerging leader, what's the next thing I have to do? And when you're an emerging leader, somewhere you're going to have to come up with a vision that's very big. And this is hard for a lot of people, because here's what happens. Most people grow up in environments, and like I'm talking about almost everybody in this audience, where they had things in their life that put negative thoughts that hold them back. It might be that you saw your dog get run over by the garbage truck, or your mom wasn't nice to you, or your dad hit you, or your uncle wouldn't take you fishing, right, Steve? Like, that's a heartbreaker. Or you went through a divorce, or you lost your grandma when you were young. Whatever it is, people get f***ed up. It's just how it is. And so what happens is they can't come up with visions anymore because they just don't dream big enough. They can. It's been taken away from them. But as an emerging leader, you have to break through and find your vision. And the vision's got to be big. Like, don't cut yourself off. And when I say big, you know what? I'll tell you, some people say, what's one of the worst things you ever did, Steve, in your life? And I say to them, building a $104 million landscape company. And they look at me like I'm crazy. Because it was one of the worst things I did, but it was one of the best things. Because just top line vanity, bottom line sanity, cash flow is king. $104 million top line means shit all. I mean, I still made a lot of money bottom line, but it could have been better. So here you are. I needed to set a vision. So I came up with this concept called 50M thinking. Now, some of you might already have figured out what it was, but I knew they were going to figure it out quick, so I was playing around with my staff, and we were about 20 million at the time. So I had a shirt that said, I'm 50M thinking with your mom. Come to me and let's do some 50M drinking. And I put a sign on the front of my truck that said, we're a 50M thinking company. And people were like, what the hell? And I could tell some people were getting it, and then every 90 days we'd have town halls, and so 3 weeks later we had town hall, and I said, we'll have a Q&A at the end, and this one lady stands up, her name was Janice, she said, Steve, I know what 50M thinking is, and I'm like, what is it, Janice? She goes, it's $50 million thinking. I said, Janice, you're right. And then these two little pricks in the front row giggled. Steve, you jerking our chain for 3 weeks on this 50M thinking concept? That's bullshit. And I said, oh, it's bullshit. I said, here's what's going to happen now. You cannot come to me and talk to me about anything. You can't bring anything up. We're not discussing it. We're not thinking about it. We're not buying it. We're not looking at it unless it's what a $50 million company would do. And in that moment, it was like taking the family picnic and cleaning all the hot dogs and shit off the picnic table and putting one candle in the middle. And I said, this is all I care about now. Everything else is gone. Because I cleared the complexity away. And as an emerging leader, you need to learn that making things more and more and more and more complicated is doing a disservice to everybody that works for you. Things get so complicated, we got to the point where we weren't cutting edge, we were bleeding edge. We were doing things way before we should do them. We were getting ourselves into hot water. We were spending too much money. So I just simplified it all. Now, around this time, we're 20 million, we're trying to grow. And then I had probably one of the biggest tests of my life. Because a guy came to visit me. Chris, we've talked about him. His name's Uncle Sam. Down in the States, this guy's a great guy. He's a recruiter for the US military. But in Canada, he's another dick. His last name should have been Dickerson. Right, Todd? And this guy came to visit me, and Uncle Sam in Canada's special accounts management. He's like, Steve, you've come out of covenant on your ratios. You're spending too much money. Here's a demand letter. 90 days, I have to fully pay back the bank. And we're about 20 million. We were running hard into our line. We had tons of debt. And I'm like, we are so screwed. And here I am as a leader, like all this emerging leadership. I'm figuring all this stuff out. But now I've driven my company right into a point where we could go bankrupt. I felt like horrible. Like seriously, you guys, you wouldn't believe how bad it felt as a leader to do that. And then I did something that changed things. At my 90-day address, it was the only time I just stood up in front of everybody and said, sorry guys, I f***ed up. And here's where we are. And I couldn't believe their faces. Like I said, we got to turn this around. We only got 86 days left. They're going to shut the company down. They're going to liquidate all the equipment. And seriously, guys, I was crying. I was in tears. But in that moment, I reached the pinnacle of the evolving leader because I showed vulnerability. I said, I really made a bad mistake and I need you to help me. And it was the most incredible thing. Everybody in that room helped me. 95 days later, I walked into the BMO, which is the Bank of Montreal. I don't even know why I'd bank with something from Quebec. And I was pissed. And I got out of that. And I couldn't even say enough F-bombs about how mad I was. And I said, here's your money, f*** off. And I moved to another bank, and we just kept growing. But I'll tell you, it would have never happened if I didn't have the guts as a leader to say that I made a huge mistake and stand up in front of everybody. You don't always have to be perfect as a leader. You can't evolve if you don't make mistakes. And if you don't admit your mistakes, you'll never get better. People start looking at you, you're not a leader. Because you're a liar. You lie to us. You tell us how great everything is. You tell us how everything's going to work out. But you're trying to lead us, but you're a liar. You're a chicken shit. Right, Chris? Chicken shit. Chicken shit. Chicken shit. You got to man up, woman up, saddle up. I don't give a f*** what you call it. But once in a while, you got to do it. And people aren't going to respect you as a leader unless you can do it. And then you tell them, okay, tears are over, let's wipe them away and let's go shoot something. And you go back out and you get stuff done. So here I was, boom. I felt like I'd evolved as a leader, a point where I could show vulnerability and ask for help on a big scale. I'd run the business almost into the ground and saved it. And now I'm off to stage 3, the final stage, the mature leader. Now, the mature leader is weird because it kind of sneaks up on you. And the first time you'll really figure out that you're a mature leader is when you've built a great company and everything's going good. And then one day you wake up and you look in the mirror and you go, what the f*** have I done? I've built a monster. This huge Frankenstein that needs cash and people and time and effort and more and more and more. And in that moment, you went, but I've become an evolved leader. I don't deserve this. Why do I have to go back and learn again? Why do I have to get flogged more times? It's because you don't get to wear the mature leadership badge until you get the shit beat out of you. And I don't care if you're a guy, woman, whatever. Every great movie that you see and you get jacked up about, it's always a comeback story. It's about somebody who got kicked down and got back up. Like, who gives a shit about Prince William? You guys like Justin Trudeau? And hang that guy by the cross. I don't like that guy. Oh, sorry, politics. He's gone anyway. So, you have to go there. You have to be there. So, this mature leadership is when you go, oh no, I have a huge responsibility. And this thing is so big and I'm tired. And so now what happens is you have to become a leader of leaders. You have to be a mentor. You have to be a teacher. You have to be a guide, a visionary. These bigger concept words are what makes up the mature leader. And if you're not ready for it, then you need to get out of the way. So here's kind of what happened when I became a mature leader. I realized, wow, I'm in trouble here. If I am not around, what's going to happen? The people were good, but I said, I got to nail this down now. So I took my top 10 people and I built them personal development plans. And they said, Steve, well, this is great. I said, no, 10 years out. They thought it was crazy. Like, here's where you're going to be in 10 years. It talked about ownership. It talked about how they could make more money. It talked about what they had to do. Some of them even went back and got their masters in arboreal culture. And we had 10 people in our company that were like super business owners. If they were weak on public speaking, I put them in Dale Carnegie. If they didn't understand financials, I put them in a mini MBA at University of Calgary. And I just developed those people. And they kept saying, Steve, why are you doing this? I said, because I got to leave you guys. They said, Steve, we don't want you to leave. You're the best boss ever. And I said, no, I got to leave. Like, if I come back, because I said, I'm restless right now. Like, I want to, I want to get back in there and do stuff. And I feel like I want to start something up. And if I do that, I'm going to f up all the good stuff you guys have done. Like, I'm like a meth addict. Like, you got to lock me in a cage. Don't let me touch the business. And I knew as a mature leader it was the right decision, but it was hard because it felt like I was, it's lonely at the top. I felt like I was like kicking myself out of the club. Like I was on this great hockey team and, I was going to send you down to the minors, Steve. But I did that and I worked with these people and I just worked with them and worked with them because that's what a mature leader does. Then I got this, I'm going to go back to Palm Springs. I got the call. Now I'd got all this people on this plan. They were super excited. And I'm talking, these are smart people. I mean, when you got, at the time I had 300 people working for me, 10 people out of 300, you got some pretty heavy hitters in here, right? I had a big pool to choose from. And then in 2019, when I got that call, private equity, and I came back to Calgary, I met the guy at a Denny's, if you believe that. Here's private equity trying to swoon me, and they take me to a Denny's. I don't know if do you guys have Denny's in Minnesota? Yeah, they're like an IHOP, but it's just way shittier. So this guy goes there to try to impress me. Oh, Denny's, well, this guy's going to be great. So anyway, he kept saying, Steve, we want to buy your company. I'm like, it's not for sale. He goes, why? So my financials aren't as good as they're going to be. I said, we're 31 million now. We're going to go to 50M thinking. He's like, what's that? I go, we're going to be a $50 million company. All the systems. He goes, that's why I want to buy you. You're such a mature leader. That's what he said. I was like, what the fuck? He's been looking at my notes. He's like, you've set your company on course to be a $50 million company. You've empowered people to do it. And he said, what have you been doing? Because it seems like you're not there a lot. And I go, well, I started up Spectrum, and I started up this development company, build industrial condos, and I got a real estate company. And he's like, you're doing all that too? And I'm like, yeah. What's your leader, Jordan? Awesome, right? So anyway, he said to me something that I'll never forget in my whole life. Because I said, it's not for sale. We're going to do better. He looked me right in the eye and said, Steve, it's not your job to tell me how much I'm willing to pay for your company. And I said, well, that's the attitude I'd like to hear. Make me some offers. The first offer, I was like, holy shit, I'm in trouble. because I think I might have to leave. So I sold the company, I took the deal, and then what happened was they asked me to come back as a mergers and acquisitions guy. We're 31 million, and I stayed there for probably about 3 months, and I kind of introduced them to a lot of companies that I knew, all in Canada, because they were a Canadian-based private equity. And then after 3 months, he said, Steve, I want to make you the CEO of this company. We're going to build it all across Canada, and I want you to run the whole thing. But you have to get rid of Spectrum. Now, I was okay with that because my partner at the time, as a mature leader, this guy was an immature leader. I couldn't hang out with him. So I said, I'm moving on. I sold Spectrum off to my partner. And I was all in as the CEO. And then over the next, like I said, till 2022, we bought probably 7 or 8 companies. So we went from 31 million to about 104, but it was cheating. Like, it was through mergers and acquisitions. I mean, we did have some organic growth. And then we got there, and then they took me out of the CEO chair and they made me corporate development officer to be more, it was bullshit. It's called hush money. They said, Steve, we're just gonna pay you to go fly fishing. Okay. And in 2024, I was so upset with how private equity was running my company that I gave back 40% of the shares that I had rolled for nothing. Because I didn't want to be associated with it anymore. ULS is a great company still, only because of the people that are there. Private equity is a weird feeling, and if you guys are looking at that, like I said, you guys can reach out to me and we can have a discussion. But for me, I was an entrepreneur, a mature leader, and I loved running companies. And I can see people like that are entrepreneurial, like lots of people in this room, right? They're entrepreneurial. But when you get bought out by private equity, you better not kid yourself and think that you still own that company and that you matter. Because if you do, you're a fool. Steve, does it resonate with you? You can feel it, right, buddy? Just a piece of meat, dude. You're a great piece of meat, though. Prime A, Alberta beef, brother. So anyway, I couldn't take it anymore. I gave him $4.5 million back and said, F off. And I walked out of the door in 2024, and it was the weirdest feeling of my life. Here I am, a matured leader, leading 2,000 people every day. And now, I don't have anybody that I'm leading. And now, I had a boss, and I'd never had a boss before, and she was called my wife. Because I went home, and she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. It was like somebody gutted me. And so I always had, everybody has things that work for them. And one of the things that worked for me, and you guys can do it if you want, is you set yourself a mantra or a saying for the year. Like one year it was going to be like, I'm going to be the best guitar player I could ever be. And then I just got right into it. It was just one simple thing. And a lot of times it was business things. And my dad, he always joked, kind of laughed about these things, or me coming up with these mantras and, my saying for the year. So my dad phones me up. And my dad, if you saw me, you'd be like, how can that guy make this guy? Dad's like 5'8", 130 pounds. And my dad said, hey, smart ass, what's your purpose now? You're sitting around the house. And I'm like, I came up with my new purpose, Dad. And he goes, what is it? My new purpose is to find my new purpose. And my dad just burst out laughing. He says, you're a cheater, you can't do that. I said, nope, that's what I'm gonna do. And kind of like, my purpose is to find my purpose as a mature leader and figure out what I wanted to do, because I felt like I wasn't done yet. I kind of went, I gotta be curious. And so I started going out and talking to people and listening to people and seeing what people had to offer. And I had tons of job offers. I had CEO offers. A lot of it I couldn't do because I had a non-compete in Canada. But I spent that whole year again playing pickleball, fly fishing. Fly fishing's cool, like cigars and stuff, but holy shit. Have you ever spent 12 hours on a river fishing by yourself? The shit that goes through your head. Oh my God. And so after this year went by, I got a really strange call from a fellow named Mark Bradley. Does anybody know who Mark Bradley is out there? Huh, that's strange. thought most people would know who he is. Anyway, Mark Bradley was the creator. He had the Beach Gardener in Toronto. He built a $50 million company. I think he sold it for $28 million. And he built a software platform called LMN, Landscape Management Network. I don't know if you guys use that, or maybe you're an Aspire user, or maybe you use Yeti. But LMN and also does Greenius. So Mark sold that company last December for $250 million. That was his check. He immediately took 50 million of the $250 million he had, and he put it into account, and he launched another company called Leanscaper, which he came to me and talked about. Steve, I want you to get involved in Leanscaper. I want you to be like our head advisor and get involved. And I'm like, well, I don't know, Mark. I'm trying to figure out my purpose, you know? And then all of a sudden it kind of dawned on me, like, you know what? This is the final stage for me. This is the final stage of being a matured leader, is to get involved and help people. Because I went back to Chip's book, and Chip's book, the very highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is self-actualization. And that happens as a leader when you've reached this epitome of success, and you've got everybody inspired, and they're all, you know, playing in the orchestra perfectly, and you can just put the stick down and back off, and then you can come back and help other people reach that same level. So I decided that that's what I was going to do, and I launched Wheatcroft Advisory, and now I work, you know, not exclusively with Leanscapers, but I'm doing that. And, you know, it's weird now because, you know, I was talking to people last night, and a bunch of great people I met, and they're all at different stages of what I went through. And I want you guys to know that it's going to be okay. You're going to figure it out. If you don't give up, you'll figure it out. And every time you fail, it's going to be a way for you guys to get better. And every time you fail, there's going to be a lesson learned. And if you don't give up, you're going to go through these 3 stages, and you're going to end up as a mature leader, and you're going to have a great life, and you're going to find peace at the end of it. And I want to leave you with one last thing, and then you guys can ask me some questions. Somewhere along my journey, my wife always wanted a dog. And I never had any animals in my house because my mom and dad didn't like pets. So my mom and dad had another son, and he was 2 years younger with me, and they said, if you want a dog or anything, you can play with your brother. Now, I seemed to like patch over to my mom and dad. I didn't really like dogs, didn't like cats, I didn't want any animals. I had enough shit going on. But my brother always wanted a dog. So anyway, finally, my brother leaves the house, he gets a dog. Tell him how great a dog is. I'm still never had a dog. Now I'm like 48 years old, and my wife buys a 3-legged, or doesn't buy it, we adopt a 3-legged husky. And this dog comes into our house, and the first thing it did is it went and shit on my $10,000 mantle of my fireplace. And I'm like, that's why I don't want a dog. But this dog was kind of cute. Like, and what a battler she is, right? Like, shot 5 times with a high-powered rifle. We got 5 bullets out of her. What a dog. So now, I thought, okay, take a leg off a dog. This thing's not going to walk a lot. Well, it's half husky, half border collie. Holy shit, did I start walking. I'm walking like, I walked 3 or 4 hours to try to wear out a 3-legged dog. And now I got to go get a hip replacement in 2 months. I blame the dog. Dog made me walk so much. She only had 3 legs, but she's the one that got me. Like, I got this one replaced after I had her for 4 years, and this one's getting replaced in 61 days from now. The reason why I count it down is because I'm in pain all the time. So I have this dog, and then I got to go on these long walks, and so I start thinking, and something pops into my head one day. I'm like, what? And sometimes I get, like, my dad's like a deep thinker. He's an engineer. Have you ever hung out with engineers? They drive you nuts. It's like 57 days of planning for an hour's worth of work. Like I said, Dad, you plan all the fun out of everything. Go hang out with your engineer buddies. But all of a sudden I got this thought in my head, and it was like thinking outside the box. And I don't know why. I just started thinking, like, what does that really mean? You know, and I asked some of my buddies that had MBAs, like, what does that mean? And they're all like, well, Steve, you know what thinking outside the box is. It's like, you know, you think about things that are bigger, like outside the box. You have an MBA, and that's your explanation of thinking outside the box? So anyway, I start walking this 3-legged husky around, and I'm walking and walking hours to live on this forestry reserve. And I'm always thinking about this, and I couldn't figure it out. there was something that was bugging me that I needed to figure out about thinking outside the box. And then I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go buy a cigar. Hey, Jordan, let's get a cigar. Because my grandpa smoked cigars. My grandpa was kind of one of these wise, old, rough kind of guys. Heavy-duty mechanic. He could fix anything with a bobby pin, gob, and a stick of gum. And I'm like, started smoking this cigar, walking around. And like when you smoke cigars, like you get such a rush of nicotine. It kind of opened my mind. I don't know if it really helped that much, but then I started liking cigars. So I started going on more walks, and I kept thinking about it. Then all of a sudden I went, holy shit, I get it now. Because everybody thinks about thinking outside the box is external to them. So I'm here, and there's a concept out here that I got to solve, like how am I going to get more plowing contracts? And I got to think outside that box for a bigger strategy. But that's not it. Every one of you, and I can see some of you, have a box around them. And that box contains you and who you're going to be, how successful you're going to be, how good of a father you're going to be, how good of a mother you're going to be, how many friends you have, where you're going to fit into social strata, what you're going to accomplish in your life. But people don't think about it. They just keep running around in a box. And they never think about that. How do I get out of the box? And to be the best leader, you got to push on the edges of that box if you want to get out and become a better leader, the ultimate leader. And I'll tell you this, I've seen people that are sitting or laying down in a 3x4 by 8 foot box. I call that a coffin. I've seen people in a 12 by 12 by 10 box. I call that a monkey cage. I've seen people in a 100 by 50 by 120 box. I call that a gymnasium. And you're only good enough to play that game, dude. And I've seen people whose box is as big as a whole country. And I've seen people's boxes that are so big, I can't even understand it. So my question, and what I want to leave you guys with, and we can have discussions around this, is when you think about yourself, how big's the box that you're in? How big is the cage that's holding you back from being a better leader? Because I'll tell you what, when you're sitting there, it's not a stagnant box. If you're in a coffin, they keep pounding nails in it. And when you're in a monkey cage, they keep wrapping chains around it. And when you're in a gymnasium, they cement the door shut. And this is where you see people on their deathbed go, I wish I woulda. I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. And they die in that box. And they just don't get any better. So I hope today I've at least shook you guys up enough. And I don't really care if you guys remember anything that I talked about, other than I want you guys to think about what box you're in and how you can be better and how you can get out of it. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's got to kick one nail out at a time, cut one lock at a time, and climb the out. Because you stay there, you're not going to get any better. And the worst part is, I hate it when people blame other people for where they are. What a cop-out. Don't buy into that shit. Anyway, I love you guys. I love this event. There's no business like the snow business. I did $55 million of snow ban, and it was a grind. But that was my favorite thing to do. You can ask Martin. I almost went to one thing, and it was SIMO events and snow events, because I was just addicted to it. I couldn't get away from it. It's a great business. You guys are fantastic people. Thank you very much.
What was the name of the book you referenced again?
Oh, I was Chip Connolly. Great companies get their mojo from Maslow. There's a lot of psychology in it, but it's good because it really focuses you on kind of how to change company cultures. And again, like every book resonates with people differently, but that one for me was kind of the one that really tipped the scale on culture.
You kind of touched on some of this, but more specifically, how did you drive the culture at ULS when you were the owner versus when private equity came in? Because you mentioned private equity created a big shift
Yeah.
in the culture, and it can do that. So how could you differentiate the way you had to lead prior to sale and post sale?
So kind of one way to put it is this. So when you sell your business to private equity and you're like an entrepreneurial type person, and then you become a corporified CEO, it's a real strange feeling. So for me, you know, I got big hockey player legs and stuff, and you guys remember when skinny jeans came out? Like I got some Vans and a cool hat, and I had to wear skinny jeans. Well, you try to put skinny jeans around these legs and my balls, it's not comfortable. Everything was pushed up, bunched up, my nuts were halfway up my ass. And that's what it felt like working for private equity. Those guys made me feel like I was wearing skinny jeans and I didn't like it. That's why I didn't last long. They have very little concern, and again, I'm speaking from my own perspective, but I've talked to 30 people that have sold their companies and I've only heard one good story. There's 29 bad ones. They have no concern for company culture because they're going to flip that thing in 3 to 5 years and they want to maximize EBITDA or whatever they're trying to drive to get the highest evaluation. So things change very quickly. Like decisions get made differently. And if you stick around and you're part of it, it feels kind of like you get your hands tied and you can't do the things that made you successful. And that's what I don't get about private equity. They buy these businesses because they're successful, and then they take a great guy like Steve back there and tell him that he doesn't know what he's doing. But they've never plowed snow before, and they've never run snow operations. And now they're trying to tell a very seasoned guy like Steve was telling me a story about what happened with him. And it's ridiculous. It's completely ludicrous. And so my goal when I became the CEO underneath the private equity firm, I told him, I said, here's the analogy. I said, I'm running a hockey team here, and I'm not the coach. I'm the GM. And what I need to do is I got to have first liners, second liners, third liners, muckers, fighters. And I said, you got to let me work within a salary cap to keep this team together. And I felt that, and I still feel this way, the number one job of a high level and efficient CEO is to manage culture and teams and manage people. That's what makes them the most successful companies, people first. But private equity, whenever I tried to get involved and try to, they would take things away from employees that I had there for tens of years. And they wanted to run it under their philosophy, but it doesn't work in this industry for a lot of reasons. And you guys know what they are, because a lot of you have staff and they're working for wages that aren't the highest across the blue collar industry, but they stay there because they love it. So if you take away that love that they have for that industry, they just leave and they go find somewhere else to be. You cannot mistreat people in this industry and think they're going to stick around. It's a fool's game. And those guys, I tell them this over and over again, to the point where I said, sometimes you got to realize you're the dumbest person in the room. And just because you're a snow person or landscaper doesn't mean you're dumb. And then I realized I'm the smartest person in the room. And the day that that happened was kind of the final, like I said, mature leader. Like, I can't be around this anymore because it's toxic to my soul. So there's a huge difference. So, and I'm not just saying this. Stevie, when you told me that stuff last night, man, it's just like, yeah, climbed in my head. Same shit, different pile, buddy. And there's probably other people in this room that have done it. Now, I'm not saying all private equity is bad, because I have heard a few positive stories, but you got to be real careful. And there's a reason to sell your company too. Just because you sell your company, you're not a bad person. If you don't want to do it anymore and you need to move on, private equity is a good place to sell, but don't fool yourself that they're going to help you grow it and it's going to be this great thing. Take the biggest check you can and say, see you later. That would be my advice.
So shifting a little bit here, in light of your experience, but not necessarily directly related to your presentation, one of the questions was, and you kind of answered it at the very end,
Yeah.
Tune in before that. What part of your business did you enjoy more, snow or landscape, and why?
It was funny because in 2004, I kind of came up with some concepts around snow removal that was pretty cool. And so I was asked by Simon to come. It was in Minneapolis, actually. And I don't know if you were there then, Martin. Were you there in 2004? Yeah. Somebody asked me to come and speak on it. I got there, and I was, not too many people knew I was. I just was up in Canada, and we didn't have a lot of snow back then. We were about 800,000. And then I remember going to Sima, and it was like, oh my goodness, what a quantum shift. And I thank Sima all the time. Like, they really, if you're not a part of Sima, then you shouldn't be in snow. But I learned so much there and so many great people and mentors. And then I came back, and that's all I could think about, because I could just see how awesome the company could be if we just embraced snow fully. It was too late to go back and be snow only. You know, and when we at 104 million, we were probably like 55 million in snow, maybe 35 million in green and other stuff in there. We had a towing company and a camp company. But snow was always my number one love. You know, it's funny because like people always ask me, like, I got buddies that are all successful, and they're always like, why did you like that so much? And I said, like, and I told them, I said, like, when I was a kid, I always played that game Risk. I don't know if you guys have played Risk, and you build empires and you try to take over. And I always felt snow was like that, building densities and taking over properties. And it was like, to me, it was like playing a game. And then I'd go out at night, and I loved working at night because I just didn't, we had so many people in our company. I just loved going to sleep and knowing all the chaos was contained in the daytime. And I could come back in the peaceful quiet of the night and light a cigar and go out in my plow truck and just crank off property after property. Just loved it. So I gotta admit, like, snow was my favorite part, and it was also our most profitable part, and it's really what made our company.
So in that same context of snow, question is, what do you see as the biggest emerging trends in snow and ice management over the next 3 to 5 years, especially in relation to labor, equipment, and technology?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, I don't know how you guys do it, but we had a good enough snow market, so as far as the labor question was concerned, we kept all our staff on full time. And for snow, we had 260 before it sold to private equity. They came in every time, and we had a program and a way to run that. And I don't know where everybody else is with that, because I know it's pretty hard to do that if you're from Boston or something. You try to keep somebody on all the time. But, you know, labor's not going to go down, and labor's going to continue to be a big part of the struggles for landscapers. So I think, you know, and I know the struggles too with pricing. And it's hard because things have moved up faster than pricing's moved up, but it's been a tough ride. But I think labor, like, you got to invest in your people and you got to train them. You got to be the best, because you can't charge enough if you're not the best. You can't, like, what I find is people sometimes just dip their toe in the snow, and that doesn't work for them. Nah, why do I do snow? You're either all in or you're all out. I mean, I've seen people that are half in, and their companies aren't that great, I'll be honest with you. Like, the guys that go all in on snow and really make it a serious thing and demand, then you got to remember not to chase revenue all the time. You got to keep the profit up. I think on technology, like, I'm a dinosaur. Like, I can barely run an iPhone, but it blows me away with what's going on. Like, Leanscaper now has built Leanscaper AI. If you guys go and Google it, you can go. It's free now until November. That thing is built with technology and all the data pulled from LMN, Greenius, hundreds and hundreds of landscape companies. So it builds stuff. It doesn't replace any of your software. It's like an operating system. But the stuff that Lana AI can do from Leanscapers blows your mind. Like, you could do, like, one guy did 100 SOPs in 14 hours on it. You can build, like, strat plans, vision plans, crew notes, and I don't know if you guys know, but ChatGPT 5.0 is coming out in another 4 months. Again, I don't know a lot, but from what I've heard, it will change the world about the same amount as cell phones did or smartphones did. Because ChatGPT 5.0 is going to be agentic AI, which most people haven't. What's that?
ChatGPT 5 is out now.
Oh, is that already? Okay, well, there you go.
Kind of messing up right now.
Yeah, but the full version, and it's going to be agentic AI, which means it's self-learning. So this kind of gets into the realm where people are worried, like, about robots taking over the world. You still need to prompt it, but once you get it going, it'll ask you questions that you'll be amazed, and it starts to learn on its own. So I think, like, labor's huge, tech's huge, and equipment just blows my mind. Like with Spectrum, equipment, we had 140 pieces of heavy equipment when I had Spectrum, and the prices went up so fast, that whole company's value is on the arbitrage of the equipment. So we had spent 25 million on heavy iron or 30 million, and then in 18 months, that same amount of iron was worth 65 million. We made 35 million just on the equipment movement. And I don't know, you know, maybe this would be a better question for Mr. Gamez and like how the heck he's doing it. But spending $300,000 or $250,000 on a loader now with the pricing, and I don't even know how, it's so hard to make money. And so you really have to demand good rates, and you really got to push on quality, and you have to educate your clients. But it's a tough haul right now, you know.
Next question is, from a leadership standpoint, how can contractors position themselves as innovators in their market without alienating long-term customers and employees?
So I would imagine that you're saying alienate by moving the curve too fast. Would that kind of thinking that way? Yeah. That's where I said, you know, some people try to be they term themselves cutting edge. We're a cutting edge in the snow industry. You hear that term a lot. We're a cutting edge company. Problem with cutting edge, it's 2 steps away from what I call bleeding edge. So, and again, you guys, this is just one guy talking here, so you got to take it with a grain of salt, talk to other people about it. My theory was to stay away from cutting and bleeding edge until it became a little bit more adopted. And my clients, if they asked about it, and I got inquiries, that pushed me towards that. But I was never really worried about a client with tech coming in and stealing my customers, because we just did such a good job. And we had enough tech in our company. You need a certain amount of tech. Like, you need to have proof of, proof that you did work. You need to, I think a lot of the stuff that's coming up with, like, we did brining, we did like liquids. That stuff's nice to have tech, because you waste a lot of money fast. And you can also put it down at the wrong time and cause a lot of problems, which a lot of people don't fully understand how to use liquids properly. All that stuff, you know, under a tech platform is very helpful to have, because you need to be pretty accurate, especially where I was from, because we would have, you know, up to 25 to 30 degrees fluctuations in 24 hours. You really had to know what was going on. So like I said, I mean, I always said is, who else is using it? If like only 5% of the people are using it, like, you should go talk to them, especially if they're in another market. Like, people like to share, like, oh, we're doing all this cool stuff. Just don't get too far ahead of the curve, because it can be pretty costly.
So this one is not in order of submission, but it ties right in with what you just talked about, so I'm going to skip to it.
Yeah.
How would you handle it when competitors would come in and undercut or undervalue your accounts? What would you do to retain those accounts and keep your company as the front runner?
Well, I think that a lot of people think that quality is the only way to keep customers. And I laugh at that, because that won't keep them. Now what's happening is people want to be informed. They want to know what's going on. They're okay with like the 80-20 rule. Like, you don't have to be perfect all the time. But what they don't like is you're perfect, you know, 94% of the time, and then 6% of the time you shit the bed. They'd rather you just be 80% and never, you're always there. Consistency, consistent messaging, consistent, you know, communications. Like, we had a very robust way of informing the clients what was going on through storms and reporting, follow-ups. We would tell them, here's how things are going to run. Now, we would never sign a contract where we didn't control dispatch. Like, that was one of our things. Like, if the client said, we're going to call you out when we need you, we don't work with you. So that in itself allowed us to have a pretty robust way to perform services and communicate. So, you know, if you have clients that come in, competitors that come in and take work on price, you know, I think it's too late. You need to be informing your clients. You should be educating. Like, Simon has so many great resources. We had a book that said, here's what you should have from, like, we pirated everything. Thanks, Martin. I know you told us to. And we had a book of why you should hire us and why we're a Simon member and why we have CSPs and why we have ASMs. And here's the liability issues, and here's why you don't want to go with a low-cost provider. Have you ever stayed up and looked at their equipment at night? Do you see what's on your parking lot? Do you know what the cost is to fix up hydraulic leaks? Oil, just, I hate to say it, but if you weren't top notch in our market, we just beat up on you. We were like bullies. We showed them every single thing the other guys weren't good at. And we told them over and over again. So they're almost scared to switch. So in our company, over the whole, you don't get to 104 million by flipping contracts. So over 104 million, we had a 95% retention every year on clients. Across the board, green, white, snow, transit work. So we lost 5% a year. And a lot of those times, there was no way we could have kept them happy anyway. We were happy, but 95% always returned. But again, you can't wait till people are taking contracts. You have to say, these are my contracts, try to come and get them. And that's when Battleford takes out a sword and you take some people's wrists off, because you gotta fight for it. And you gotta make the clients know why you're the best and why you're loyal to them and that you have a relationship there. The worst thing that can happen to you gotta be careful of this, is you got a guy and he's managing 50 properties and he's giving them to you. The day that guy retires or gets replaced by somebody else, you better get your ass over there so fast that you get a speeding ticket, because that's where you lose contracts. Right there, change of authority. I have the control of this. Now I don't, Steve. This new guy, Rick, has it. And you're like, I don't know Rick. Uh-oh, red light, red light. You better get to know Rick. And if Rick says, well, Steve, I was brought in here to cut budgets, and it seems you better take the time to educate him, because if he doesn't know, he's going to take somebody else.
So the last one we'll end with is, question is, I'm currently a crew leader. What is the best way to advance my own career path into higher leadership at the company I work for?
It's a good question. And I think that, first of all, it really should be the owner or your direct report that's really mentors you along. But if that's not happening, you need to take things into your own hands. So if you're a crew leader, what I would suggest is, where can I get additional certification? Because some of this stuff really isn't that hard to get. I'm working with some companies now. I said, you need to be ASM, you need to have a CSP on staff. If you don't have that, or if you're a crew leader and you don't have that, you go and get that, and then get your Safe Salt management certificate, and maybe you go and take a horticulture course at night about pruning trees. I'm telling you, if you were working for me and somebody did that, you're moving up, especially if you do it on your own accord. I always said, here's all the courses available, I'll pay for them. And it was crazy. It's all free. You get time off of work. You get to go to Milwaukee. You get to go do shit. And usually 10% of the people would do it. But if you're a self-starter and go do that, and your owner doesn't acknowledge that and give you credit for that, I hate to say it, but it's a pretty good reason to go find work for somebody else. And I'm telling you, I took those guys from every company I could. Somebody came to me and said, I'm working at this company, Steve, and I've been stuck in this one. Oh, what do you have? I'm an ASM, and I got a port degree. I'm like, see you tomorrow. What are you getting paid? 18. Well, I'll pay you 23. What? $5 more? I said, yep, but you're going to have to earn it. I took everybody, like anybody that had certification or educated, come on over. You need those people, especially if you want to grow.
Just to round that one out, if you are at a company that isn't pushing or promoting that type of career advancement, how can you take the bull by the horns yourself and do it? Or do you need to go to a new company?
Well, I think, it depends on what your relationship is with the owner. You got to remember, everybody's developing at a different level, right? So when I talked about this, box that you're containing, your owner could stay like that for his whole life and you're working for him. I've worked with so many people, I'm saying, you better get better as a leader, or your staff's going to leave. They're going to be better leaders than you. You know what happens when really, really good leaders work for you and you're not becoming a better leader? They'll fire you. And how they fire you is they say, we're all leaving and going to go work for this guy. Or we're going to start up our own company. That's another one I see all the time. I always told people, if you work hard, get educated, I'll give you the world. I'll build a place. That's the reason why I got so big. For the last 15 years in my company, I said, I'm taking out $500,000 a year for myself. Everything else goes back into the company. Reinvest it, give raises, keep people around. And they're like, why? And I said, because I want to go to the gym and go fly fishing and start these other companies. I don't want people leaving. Well, Steve, it's not fair to you. I'm like, yes, it is. Because I don't have to even come to work. It was the best feeling ever. $500,000 annuity a year. It was awesome. Awesome.
All right, everyone, big round of applause for Steve.
Thanks, buddy. Oh, awesome.